Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efene, the Malabite.
Good morning.
Good morning, Emmanuel.
Good morning, Rufai.
Elder Emmanuel Efene.
Tundu, I greet you specially.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. Thank you.
Now, let's start with these days newspapers. Nigeria's newspaper of records. EndSARS. Governors to begin judicial review of police brutality. Supervise new tactical team. Establish funds for victims. IG cautions personnel on use of force. Again, hoodlums attack demonstrators in Lagos. Quite interesting the way they capture this story that, yes, youths protesting police brutality for the past 9 days got hefty concessions from the federal government and state governments yesterday as the National Economic Council rose from a meeting in Abuja and directed the 36 governors and ministers of the Federal Capital Territory to take charge of negotiations with the protesters in their respective states. I hope the Minister of the Federal Capital is reading that. Of course, specifically NEC directed that the governors should establish judicial panels to investigate alleged police brutality and supervise the fresh team, the tactical team being set up by the Inspector General of Police, as well as raise funds to compensate victims of cruelty by the defunct SARS. Now, Sanwo-Olu already one step ahead, setting that a 200 million fund to compensate victims. I'm sure his suggestions must have weighed heavily during the discussion at the NEC meeting. Now, the police, no, the governors now having a role. Ruben, you were trying to expatiate on that. I'm sure we'll get back to that. But let's just see how other newspapers are reporting this story. Governors, SWAT unnecessary now. States to compensate victims of SARS, judicial panels to probe police brutality in 36 states. But beside the photograph, there are some other stories inside the newspaper. Military warns hoodlums against attacking protesters. And also, there's another story. Army vows to deal with troublemakers, pledges loyalty to Buhari. Now, the Guardian newspaper, Nigeria's The Guardian newspaper, northern governors insist on SARS. Protesters defy threats. I read the statement signed by Governor Lalong, who is the chairman of the Northern Governors Forum, about SARS, how it has been helpful to the northern states. But I don't know whether this is the time to chip in that statement that they need SARS should continue to exist after the president has signed off on disbanding SARS. That statement, I don't think is necessary at this time. Like pouring fuel into raging fire. Now, the Daily Trust newspaper, National Economic Council proves police brutality. Governors worried over EndSARS ban. Army warns troublemakers. Police decry use of force. Now, the Nigerian Tribune, still the same lead story, police brutality, governors to set up judicial panels of inquiry. But above the masthead, something new, something interesting, something to help our democracy. Constitution review. INEC seeks replacement of manual with electronic voting. Presidential election for 18th February 2023. That is something that will change the narrative of our elections, and it is good. that INEC is driving that process. And we expect the President Muhammadu Buhari, and the National Assembly to key into that proposal so that we can have our elections being seen as free, fair, transparent, and violence-free. Now, the Punch newspaper attacks protest ban. Lagos protesters hire bouncers. FCT minister under fire. 2 killed, 4 cops detained as controversy trails Lagos thugs attack. Lawyers, Aisha Yusufu, others hit Bello, threaten legal action against him. Police killings, 36 states, FCT to establish panels, military warns attackers. Now, the Vanguard newspaper, gunfire in Lagos as thugs attack EndSARS protesters. The Daily Times of Nigeria, Southern leaders tackle not on restructuring state reforms. That's the lead story of the Daily Times. Sun, the Daily Sun newspaper, SARS divides governors. Northern governors take stand, declare preference for ban anti-robbery squad. Keep team in your zone, Ohaneze replies them. Demonstrators besiege National Assembly. Now, the Daily Independent, military warns as EndSARS protesters vow to continue. FCTA bans street protests, cites COVID-19 protocols. Northern governors reject dissolution of SARS. CUPP rejects ban on protests, use of thugs on protesters. Serap sues Buhari, IGP over harassment of protesters. National Assembly to push for implementation of protesters' demand. Now, if we just look at the foreign newspapers quickly, the UK, coronavirus, still the main issue if we look at what the Guardian newspaper is reporting. We must not make the North a sacrificial lamb. Yes, mayors and MPs are angry because of the restrictions. The Manchester mayor, Bonham, angrily rejects move to highest tier of restriction. Government COVID strategy left in tatters amid widespread revolts. London and Essex, among places, moved to tier 2 restrictions. Of course, mayors and MPs from the greater Manchester area are kicking against the restrictions that will come into effect today. But the rise in cases makes it necessary for the government to take more action. But the Daily Mail is referring to what is happening in the UK right now, the rise in cases and the strategies and opposition to the strategies as an epidemic of madness. Millions more Britons were put into lockdown yesterday, sparking fresh crises for struggling businesses. About half of England, about 30 million, will be under lockdown from today.
Emmanuel Efene,
yes.
We'll take a short break at this point, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
And the review of newspapers will continue. We'll be right back. It's to the Morning Show here on the Arise News Channel. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Arise News Channel. Still reviewing top stories in today's newspapers from around the world. Is Emmanuel Efene.
Yes.
Emmanuel, back to you.
Yes, Ruben, thanks. Now, let's just go to the USA before we come back to the streets of major cities in Nigeria where there is a new conversation. Now, the Wall Street Journal, daily US virus cases climb to highest level since August. New coronavirus cases hit their highest level since mid-August. And of course, the report yesterday, 59,494 new daily cases, the highest, as I said earlier, since mid-August. That is the situation of the coronavirus in the USA. But if we look at the Financial Times, the international edition, yes, Beijing's first bond offer to U.S. investors draws record demand. Strong reception for $6 billion sales. Yes, they put up $6 billion bond sale yesterday, but the demand was record high, and that demand was put out there by China's finance ministry. The rebound of Chinese economy responsible for the record demand for that bond, and of course, defying the trade war between the US and China. Now, if we just come back to the streets of Nigeria, where we have this conversation, the front page of This Day once again, the concessions which This Day described as hefty, I'm sure that will be debated by some, hefty concessions to the protesters. Yes, compensation for victims, judicial review of past atrocities of SARS, so that those who committed these atrocities will have their day in the court of law and punished accordingly. But the role of the governors in overseeing this fresh body called SWAT, giving a role to the governors, after all, over police and policing. New thinking, but I think we need the force of law to back that. Constitutional review in progress, governors controlling the police or state police. Which way to go? Ruben, you were about saying so much on that earlier, but time cut you short.
Okay, if you want me to go back to the subject, I'll try to be brief. Now, I said, well, it's commendable that we see that the state governors are taking an interest in the security situation in the country because they are the most affected. As you have seen in the Federal Capital Territory, as you have seen in Lagos State, as you have seen also elsewhere. The governors held a governors forum on Wednesday where they discussed an interface with the Inspector General of Police. Now, yesterday, they had the National Economic Council meeting, which was chaired by the Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. And what this day is reporting on the front page is part of the outcome of that. And now what we are seeing is that the governors are being given responsibility to manage the security situation in the states. They're going to set up, as we have been told, judicial panels of inquiry, which will sit for 6 months. And during the period, that 6 months period, people are expected to take their complaints to that panel of inquiry, which will be shared by a retired judge. And it will have representatives from among the youths, from students, from the National Human Rights Commission. All of that detail has been provided. And I said, yes, it's a good move. It's also a way of reassuring the young people of Nigeria that government is taking their concerns seriously. But with those young persons who are on the streets, who have become comfortable staying on the streets, would they agree that this is a step forward? That is one question. However, also choosing who will represent the youths is another problem. Because these young people, they're saying, we don't have a leader. I mean, they are even quarreling among themselves over some youths who went, and I heard a meeting with some government officials and businessmen in Nigeria, and they're saying, you don't represent us. I cited the example of Umoyele Sowore, who reportedly showed up at the protest yesterday in Abuja. They asked him to leave because they didn't want anybody to be identified as a leader. So the governors have a heavy task ahead of them, and we'll be taking a look at how each one of them manages to translate this into real terms, because it's the economy in those states that will be affected. Look at Lagos. People can move freely between the mainland and the island now. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway has been taken over for days. And Lekki toll gate has been taken over for days. And I hope Rotus at some point will help us calculate, the impact of this on the economy, not just of Lagos, but also the entire country itself. Now, the NEC also yesterday resolved that there should be a compensation fund. We have seen Lagos State taking the lead in that regard. We have seen Oyo State, Seyi Makinde's Oyo State, making efforts in that direction. We would like to see more states, making efforts. However, one other issue that you brought up is the what looks like a difference between southern governors in the south and governors in the north. The governors of the north are saying, well, we do not agree that SARS has been disbanded because we need SARS in the north. Well, I don't know whether those governors from the northern part of Nigeria are aware that SARS has been replaced with SWAT, which is even supposed to be a better equipped unit of the police.
Is to be replaced.
Yes.
They have not even recruited for the SWAT.
Yes.
For the SWAT.
However,
so that people don't get the impression that you are just changing name.
Yeah. However, I hope that the Nigerian government will also listen to the governors, because the governors did not just go to that meeting to take directives. They presented their own views. They are of the view, for example, that the timing of the announcement of SWAT was too sudden, was too desperate, and that has, contributed to the cynicism of the young people of Nigeria. Well, maybe there's a way they can correct that. They also spoke about police reform. They talked about the welfare of policemen and all of those other issues. The military has also waded in the last 24 hours, but I hope that nobody will deploy the military onto the streets of Nigeria, because if that happens, and with the resolve that these young people have shown, young people already taking mattresses to the streets and eating pepper soup at the Lagos Lekki toll gate. When I saw a picture of that pepper soup, I felt that some of us may have to join this thing, even if to go and eat pepper soup.
Ruben, I don't think many people will agree with you that it is a comfort that is keeping them on the street.
No, I'm just joking.
There is a resolve. There's a resolve which we have not seen in this climb before.
Mr. Afeni, I just want to talk about the trust deficit. And it's the trust deficit that is playing out here. When you look at the interaction of the hefty concessions, like this day reported that the government is making, and the people not still, the young protesters on the street still saying, this is not enough, this is not what we want. It's the trust deficit. And how can we collapse this? It's going to be a major balancing act on behalf of the governors. But I also want the governors to be very sincere in all of this. Because we have seen governors, too, that came out and said, you know what, you must not protest in the state. There was a certain governor of Rivers State, that banned protest in the state, but at some point he had to join the young protesters when he saw that the power of the people was even more than the people in power. And he saw that. There was also a case of another governor that decided calling Yahoo boy that gave protesters 4 million naira.
No, they've denied that.
Okay.
Ekereto Udo called me and said it's not true.
It's not true, okay.
Ekereto Udo is the governor's chief press secretary.
Okay, there was an allegation of that.
An allegation.
An allegation, let's put it as that. So the governors, too, must come with that level of transparency across all the states. And if the governors are going to settle this, the northern governors that are saying they're in support of SARS, how are they going to be able to quell the tension and the protest on the streets if they have taken a stance before now that they need SARS, and the protesters on the streets are saying they don't need SARS? I mean, how are we going to balance that out?
The Northern Coalition Group are saying that their main issue is security in the north.
Security in the north, and also they want the end of SARS.
With the governors.
No,
they want not necessarily on SARS.
They want the end of SARS. It was part of their demand.
Yes, but they want security.
But
the governors want security with SARS.
But when the governors are saying they want SARS, some other the youth groups are saying they don't want SARS, then you know there's going to be a collusion of ideas. So let's look at that. But
well,
I
this
thank you
conversation will continue for a long while.
All right, I thank you.
You may want to look at INEC and electronic voting.
We don't have
Unfortunately, I
time.
didn't get the chance to chip in.
Oh, too bad.